Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, looking back at series previews and predictions, what to expect in Game 5 as the Wolves look to close out the Warriors, and also the double big lineup with Naz and Rudy, why that has worked to the Wolves' advantage in this series against Golden State, and will we see more of it in Game 5? It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day and happy Game 5. The Wolves are back at Target Center tonight looking to close out the Steph Curry-less Golden State Warriors. He will not play on Wednesday night. The Wolves have a chance to win without having to fly back to San Francisco for a Game 6, which wouldn't be until Sunday. So there's a lot of reasons why the Wolves need to just take care of business on Wednesday night and put this series to bed. Today, I want to talk about some of the things that I previewed prior to the series. So, just a couple of weeks ago, what I was expecting to see out of this series. Actually, no, just 1 week ago. Man, the only 1 day of rest in between all these games is crazy. What I was expecting to see in the series, what has actually come to fruition from those predictions and that preview, and then also what that means for tonight. And related to that, where I actually want to start is the Timberwolves' big lineups with Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert on the floor together. They did it a couple of times in the second half, and they've done it a handful of times for short stints throughout the series. And so I want to talk about what that did in the regular season versus what it's done in the playoffs, and specifically related to the Warriors matchup, what that Naz plus Rudy lineup looks like. So lots to get to today. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. Let's start with Naz Reid. So, and this was also one of my keys to the series, and we'll talk a bit more about this specifically later. But coming into the series, I named Naz as the X factor when I did the preview episode, the crossover episode with Locked On Warriors. I said, look, I think Naz Reid is the guy. If there is an X factor, this of course was prior to the Steph injury, so expecting this to be at least a 6-game series, and it may still be. But I thought that if there was going to be a non-star that made a massive difference for the Wolves, so not Ant, not Julius Randle, I thought it was going to be Naz Reid. And, well, I think one of the games mixed in there wasn't very good. I think it wouldn't be wrong to say that the next best Wolves player consistently in the series, I mean, you could certainly argue for Jaden McDaniels, and I think, technically all things considered, he has been the next best Wolves player. But Naz Reid's had a really nice series, and he was a big part of the Game 4 win. And I also really liked the minutes he played with Rudy Gobert. So I want to start there, and then we'll get back to Naz here in a minute. But Naz and Rudy, going back through the game, played a couple of minute and a half or so stints together, bridging the gap between or really giving Julius Randle rest is what it was. In the third quarter, it was for a minute and a half, and it was a net 0. The score remained the same. In the fourth quarter, I believe it was the same. There might have actually been a -1 in that stretch. It was for a minute and a half at a time. And that's how Finch has used those guys together and those big lineups so far in the playoffs. And it happened a lot more frequently in the regular season. But in the playoffs to date, so through Game 4 of the Warriors series, so we're talking, they played 5 total games against the Lakers in 4 games. So we're talking 9 games. So small sample, obviously. Naz and Rudy have played together. Naz and Rudy have played together in the playoffs for 155 possessions, which is actually a little bit more than I would have expected. Obviously, still a very small sample. They've been at plus 2.4, and they've done it all on the defensive end. The offense has not been good with those guys together, although the most used lineup with 60 possessions, and this is interesting, is it's Rudy, Anthony Edwards, and the 3 bench guys, the bench mob, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Dante DiVincenzo. Now, to be clear, Dante and Nickeil have not been consistent in the playoffs. Dante, for the most part, at least offensively, has been bad. I think he's had good defensive moments. I think he's had decent moments as just like on the offensive end, but not scoring the basketball. I think Alexander Walker, like he just had I think a perfect shooting night the other night. He's had some good offensive moments, but he hasn't been as good as he was for most of the playoffs last year. So these units are being carried by Naz and Ant for the most part. And then defensively, Rudy obviously having a big impact on that. So as a whole, the Naz Rudy minutes are a plus 2.4 net rating so far in the playoffs. But the best lineup, or excuse me, the most used and also a best lineup with those guys together is Naz Rudy plus Ant, and then the other two bench guys, DiVincenzo and Alexander Walker, is a plus 9.6 in 60 possessions. Again, a very small sample. But that particular unit has done it on both ends of the floor, has been really good on offense and on defense. So, and then if you want to look at regular season, just to see like what was the most used Naz Rudy lineup, the double big lineup, it was in fact that same lineup in the regular season. It was that same lineup with the two, with Rudy and Ant plus the three guys, the bench mob. Those guys played 261 possessions together in the regular season. So this is also notable. They're nearly a quarter of the way to the same number of to the number of possessions they played in the regular season, despite only playing 9 playoff games. That unit of Ant, Rudy, and the three bench guys, the double big Naz Rudy lineup with Ant, DiVincenzo, and Alexander Walker, is already nearly a quarter of the way to the number of possessions they played in the regular season. And in those regular season possessions, they were a plus 17.6. They were an 89th percentile defense and a 58th percentile offense. So again, they did a lot of it defensively. But Chris Finch has used that lineup more frequently in the playoffs because Naz has played well and because obviously Ant's played more minutes. And also, obviously some of these guys between DiVincenzo and Rudy were injured for chunks of the season. But the point is, that's the best double big lineup. It was successful in the regular season, and it's been successful in the playoffs. Backing up a half step further on a much more macro level, Naz Rudy lineups in the regular season were phenomenal. Lineups with Naz and Rudy on the floor together were a 96th percentile unit in the regular season, a plus 13. They were a 99th percentile defensive unit. Any bench unit, or excuse me, any unit, any five-man unit with Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert on the floor together was a 99th percentile defensive unit. That's extremely impressive. And Chris Finch, I think, for the most part, has pushed the right buttons with when to go very large. And we're talking playing against a Golden State team that just, it has some length. And we'll talk in a little bit about the Wolves' success and actually really more accurately lack thereof at the rim offensively against this Golden State team. Golden State doesn't have traditional rim protectors. Kevon Looney, when he's in the game, which isn't that often, and at times Kuminga, they can at least like linger near the rim and provide length and athleticism to deter you a little bit. But there's no traditional size with this Warriors team, and that has worked to the Wolves' advantage. The Timberwolves, well, they have not been dominant on the glass. Another thing we can talk about. The overall size is still beneficial in other areas, whether it's simply keeping loose balls alive or deterrence around the paint against a team that doesn't actually want to get to the rim anyway in Golden State. But the Naz Rudy lineups together in the regular season were phenomenal, and so far in the playoffs have been good overall. And that's the point here. And I thought that bridging the gap with the Randle minutes, with how good Randle has played in the postseason, was huge in the Wolves Game 4 win. And again, we're still talking Naz and Rudy together, just 155 playoff possessions, but still a plus 2.4 and phenomenal defensively, very good defensively. So that's a phenomenon to keep an eye on. And I think it's also like, it's certainly one of the ways that could go about closing out Game 5 is just playing big for longer, especially if Naz is going to get hot offensively like he did in Game 4. And we'll talk a bit more about Naz here in a little. So that's actually what I want to do is I want to take a half step back and look at my series preview, the things that I thought were keys in this series, how the Wolves are performing in a couple areas in which they're underperforming that aren't necessarily alarming, but actually it's almost encouraging in a sense if you look at how bad the Wolves have performed in some weird areas versus the fact that they're up now 3-1, albeit against a Steph-less Warriors team, but they're up 3-1 in this series and on the brink of going to a second consecutive conference final. So a lot to get to. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at WayFair. It is springtime, the days are getting longer, and the weather is warming up. And of course, people are spending more time outside, and that means it is the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony, WayFair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. WayFair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. Patio set. That's a big thing for me. We actually just got some patio furniture last year. We're about to get some string lights from WayFair to help extend the outdoor space, expand it a little bit, and make it really good for all seasons. At least when the weather's nice enough, but it's the right time of year to refresh all that stuff. And also, no matter what your style is, there's a mix of styles to choose from at WayFair. They make it super easy to find pieces that match your vibe without spending a fortune, which is also massive. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair, WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. Okay, so looking at what my, I guess, series preview points were, I did the crossover episode with Lockdown Warriors just over a week ago, and I had some concerns, a couple of things. One was I was worried about the Warriors' ability to force turnovers and the Timberwolves' turnover issues throughout the regular season. In the regular season, Minnesota finished 18th in turnover rate, which actually isn't that bad considering they were bottom third basically the whole season. And, we're like bottom 5 team in terms of turnover rate over the first couple of months of the season, which is very encouraging. Now, since the Jimmy Butler trade in February, the Warriors were number 1 in the NBA at turning opponents over nearly 18% of the time. So pretty close to 1 in 5 possessions, they were forcing an opponent turnover, and Minnesota turned it over at a 14.6%, so nearly a 15% clip themselves overall in the regular season. So again, the Warriors number 1 at forcing turnovers defensively since the Butler trade, and number 1 in overall defense, points per 100 possessions, or defensive rating since the Jimmy Butler trade. I was really worried about the Warriors' ability to turn teams over and the Timberwolves' propensity to turn the ball over, and taking it a step further, their lack of a point guard this side of Mike Conley, which is something the national media has wrung their hands about or wrung their hands over. TV, podcasts, etc., is like, hey, they don't have another point guard. It is a little weird, and I've been saying for the last 2 years it would be great to have one. But that said, the way Minnesota's handled it has mostly kind of sort of worked out. And as we talked about on, I think it was Monday's show, it would have been following the game 3, kind of the squeaking by win that the Wolves got in game 3, where the Warriors were up in the second half on the road, and the Wolves could have easily gone down 2-1. Like, that was dicey. The first half of that game, especially, Golden State was just putting 2 on Ant, and the Wolves were still insisting on having Ant bring the ball up the floor. That was an issue. And then on possessions where Julius Randle and occasionally Mike Conley would run the offense, Ant was starting off the ball, and they could run an action to get him a one-on-one, or at least get him, coming off a screen, some movement to try and get him catch and shoot opportunities, or at least opportunities for him to not be hounded for 94 feet. And that was a concern of mine coming into the series. It actually has been an issue. Like, if you look at the series long 4 factors over the 4 games, Minnesota's got a turnover rate north of 16%, which is not good. Again, in the regular season, it was 14.6%. Now, that's the raw number. That's not the cleaning the glass number, filtering out garbage time. There were some garbage time turnovers, actually quite a few of them, especially at the end of game 4, when the Warriors took the 21-point lead and made it a 7-point lead when it was all said and done. The turnover rate is still a concern. And if the Wolves are if they kick away game 5, that's going to be why. Because they get excited in transition on their home floor, and they have these, Naz and Julius were maybe the 2 biggest culprits over the last couple of games in Golden State, where they would just make silly open floor passes. DiVincenzo has been liable to do it. The turnover rate is still a concern, and it's still something I'd be worried about if I were the Wolves. Another thing that I was worried about, that also, again, recognizing the Wolves are up 3-1 in the series, I was worried about the Wolves' ability to consistently offensive rebound, which was something they've been very good at for the last 5 months or so. And sure enough, their offensive rebound rate in this series is actually below Golden State's by nearly 4 full percentage points. The Wolves are just over 27% offensive rebound rate. And against a team like the Warriors that does not have a traditional center, they are small. Minnesota's got to have a better offensive rebound rate than that. That should have been a bigger part of what the Wolves are trying to do in this series. And they have failed to grab offensive rebounds and capitalize off those with any real consistency. And to me, that's something that if I'm the Wolves, like, I'm crashing the glass like crazy in game 5. I'm trying to, because the other thing is Golden State's got such a good half-court defense. It's actually a little bit like what teams are trying to do against Minnesota is you'd much rather score in transition against them or off of a broken floor / kind of scramble drill off an offensive rebound type situation than you would a set Warriors defense. I mean, Draymond Green and this Warriors defense, with or without Steph Curry, are incredible. I say again, number 1 defense since the trade deadline. And overall for the season, a top-tier defense. They were good before the Butler trade. But between Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, they have 2 of the better team defenders in the entire NBA. And I like that. That to me is just another reason to dedicate more resources to offensive rebounding, to scoring off of putbacks, not to mention the free throw attempts that generates and possibly the kick out 3-point opportunities for wide open 3-point attempts. If you're crashing the offensive glass hard. And Golden State, well, they are looking to run. I mean, they're running just as much after makes as they're after misses. Like, I think if you're the Wolves, you go back to that January strategy of like, let's get after the offensive boards and try and get some hard-earned buckets that way to try and combat, the easy buckets the Warriors are trying to get in transition, and also to put up, to have a more creative way to go up against the league's best defense over the last few months. Rather than being stuck in the half court against a really phenomenal set defense like the Warriors and keyed by Draymond Green, try and score off a putback, try and score off a kick out after an offensive rebound, be creative with ways to get the ball up on the rim without having to deal with a double team for 94 feet or a trap at the timeline or whatever the case might be. I think there's multiple ways to really make a difference on the offensive glass and generate offense that way. A couple more things I want to hit that were keys to this series coming in. I want to talk about the 3-point line. I want to talk about what I think is going to happen in game 5. We'll do all that here next to close the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at CarGurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting. But between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. And that's why I love using CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second guessing yourself. If you need a deal you can trust, CarGurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. Plus, my favorite feature is the price drop alert. If there's something you have your eye on, you'll know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget because of the price drop alert. And the in-depth vehicle details will give you peace of mind before stepping onto any lot. It's no wonder that SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows CarGurus as the #1 most visited car shopping site. Buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus, CarGurus.com, CarGurus.com. Okay. Let's talk about the 3-point line, which of course has been an absolute roller coaster for the Wolves in the playoffs. The piping hot game 1 performance against the Lakers that got all the, they're not going to shoot this well the whole series. And then of course, perfectly bookended with the game 5 closeout win where they shot a historically terrible 7 for 47, 14.5-ish, 14.4-ish% from outside the arc. And they, of course, won both those games because this Wolves team can win games in multiple ways. We've seen that so far in this series, where they had game one, just a miserable shooting performance. They ultimately lost that game, following the Steph injury even. But that, that was a game they were obviously competitive in, and they had some shooting woes over the first few games of the series. But then more recently have come around outside the arc. I think it was game 3 where they were very, very good outside the arc. And, this last time out in game 4, Minnesota was 16 of 34, which is 47% from three. Golden State was 8 of 27, which is under 30%. So Wolves made twice as many. They attempted 7 more three-pointers in that particular game. My take coming into the series wasn't simply a Buddy Hield, Steph Curry kind of like, oh no, they're going to be good at three-point shooting. It was actually just as much the Wolves' offense and taking advantage of corner three-point opportunities. Overall this season, Golden State was 18th in allowing opponent corner three-point attempts. So they allowed more corner three-point attempts than 18 of the 20 teams in the NBA. And overall, they were 11th in terms of allowing opponents to shoot. And then accuracy-wise, which there's a little bit more noise there, but it's not all noise. There's some obviously technique involved with closing out and rotations and how strategy-wise, like, it does matter. But the accuracy against Golden State was over 41% from the corners, which was meant Golden State was 28th. So, like, 27 teams did a better job of defending corner threes in terms of accuracy than Minnesota. And overall from three, the Golden State was 19th in the regular season. 36.7% is what opponents shot from three-point range. And for the Wolves, of course, last season were number 1 in the NBA in three-pointers made. This year, not quite as prolific, but still very good. And so I thought that was an area Minnesota was going to have a clear advantage and would need to just need to find more opportunities to launch corner threes, especially if the Warriors were going to play more zone. And they did in the second quarter, and it initially baffled the Timberwolves. They seemed like they had never seen a zone before. We've seen the song and dance before. I talked about it a little bit on Monday's show, or Tuesday's show, excuse me. But ultimately, the Wolves cracked the code. Conley was fouled shooting a corner three against the zone because of a late rotation and sloppy closeout. And those are the types of things you have to do, is force those opportunities and try and make the defense uncomfortable. Like, goes without saying, put a guy at the nail, distribute from him. Like Kyle Anderson was so good at that last year. And there's, remember the OKC game, the comeback that the Wolves had against the Thunder in late January, early February. And Joe Ingles hadn't been playing, came in just to help crack the zone. I don't think we're going to be there because the Wolves did eventually crack the code there. But the more zone that's played, if they're going to play a 3-2 or a 1-2-2, like, there's going to be corner three-point opportunities. And we finally saw Minnesota start to come around and hit those in game 3. Like, that's been an issue, or game 4, excuse me. So Golden State has been better, a little bit better post Butler trade of defending the corners, but it's still an issue for them. Then on the flip side, the Wolves have avoided allowing, or I should say avoided. Yeah, I mean, that's the right way to say it. They've kept Buddy Hield from going nuts, which is huge. Golden State was second in the NBA in three-point frequency overall. And obviously Steph's a huge part of that. And that number has actually gone up a little bit after Jimmy Butler arrived, more because of his facilitation than obviously his three-point shooting. But they're only 20th in percentage. This is, again, in the regular season. So they've got a bunch of guys that are mediocre three-point shooters, but their strategy is still to get down there and launch it. And obviously we've seen that work for them. But that was another key coming into the series, was defending the three-point line and making them pay. And you'll notice that the most serious run Golden State had in this game 4 was in the second quarter with Jimmy Butler on the bench. Golden State pushed the tempo, and Mike Conley missed, I think it was him both times, missed open three-point attempts to the half court. Well, Minnesota's offense was a little clunky early, and Julius Randle had to pull them out of it, and was fantastic. There were opportunities to hit open threes that would have made a big difference, and we wouldn't have to have the Anthony Edwards logo 3, although I'm glad we got it. They cut the lead from 5-2 at the buzzer prior to halftime. I think that if the Timberwolves had just hit some of those open threes, and specifically Conley, he wasn't the only one. And we'll talk about Naz here in just a second. Then this whole series looks differently. And actually, while I'm talking about that, let's also hit the shooting at the rim. Minnesota is actually third of any playoff team, and we could throw out the teams ahead of them because this on cleaning the glass, it includes everybody that made the playoffs. Like Atlanta and Detroit Atlanta was a play-in team, right? Like these guys have been eliminated a long time ago. So if you want to take out Atlanta and leave Detroit, fine. Detroit was shooting rim attempts 34.3% of the time in the playoffs. The Wolves are 34%, which is second and 2.5 percentage points ahead of the Knicks, who are third. Okay, so the Wolves' frequency at the rim is great. It is higher than what it was during the regular season, despite how much more physical the game is now. During the regular season, their frequency of getting to the rim was just 31%. So it's a nearly 4% more often the Wolves are getting all the way to the rim. Now, in terms of rim accuracy, it's a different story. Minnesota is the fourth worst, and Atlanta and Sacramento are both below Minnesota. So throw them out, and they're second worst to only the Knicks in terms of percentage at the rim. Minnesota's shooting under 61% at the rim. So how much of that is fluky? Well, I would say a pretty big deal, or a pretty great deal of that is fluky. When, like in the regular season, Minnesota was 12th in rim shooting percentage. They were 67.5%. 67.5% in the regular season. And so far in the playoffs, Minnesota is 61% at the rim. So the positive news is they're getting to the rim. The negative news is they're missing. But a lot of that is going to be there could be some physicality involved, but again, they're second to last out of the playoff teams that the non-play-in playoff teams. So we're grading on a curve here, right? It's not simply they're 7% worse, but everybody's 7% worse. No, they went from a top tier team to a bottom tier team in terms of finishing at the rim. So a lot of that is going to be noise. A lot of it's going to be flukiness. A lot of it's going to be, hey, Ant normally makes these layups. We've seen him miss so many layups in the playoffs so far. And just assuming, kind of like with the 3-point shooting, eventually it's going to come around between Rudy and Ant, who are the guys that get the most rim attempts on the Wolves. Like we've seen guys like Nikhil be really good at the rim. Jaden's been awesome at the rim lately. So they've actually more than held up their end of the bargain. It's the Ants and the Rudys that need to figure themselves out. And I like their chances to do so in terms of converting at the rim. And you could throw Naz Reid into that category too. Naz was big the other night. I did want to mention him again as someone who I thought was an X factor for this series. And I still don't think Golden State has a matchup for him that is palatable in any way. If you're a Warriors fan, Naz, of course, can take quote unquote bigs into the post, or more likely he's going to beat them off the dribble, and he can take smalls in the post and score on them as well. For the series, Naz is 53% from the floor and nearly 48% from three. And of course had a huge game 4 performance. So I continue to stand by the idea that Naz Reid himself could probably swing one of these, hopefully only one more game. But that I wanted to shout that out. All right. That's all I got for you today. The live postcast tonight, Jack and Luke, of course, that's over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. They'll go live immediately following Wolves Warriors at Target Center. I will be back on Thursday with the post-game pod. We're going to talk about what happened Wednesday night. Hopefully we're talking about a Timberwolves series clincher, and we're on to the next thing. As of this recording, OKC and Denver are battling in a close game in a pivotal game 5 in OKC. So we'll talk a bit more about that later in the week. Hopefully the Wolves can close it out Wednesday, and Friday we could peek ahead, maybe talk about that other series a little bit, what we've seen so far. And that'll be Friday's show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. A reminder that after you make us your first listen, you can make your second listen to Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night, until an NBA champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.